Okay. Um, so to share, kind of part of what I've noticed in my life is this collision of worlds. And so that's kind of the theme. And I kind of had something prepared. So this is in this presentation, I have yet to meet anybody who isn't challenged or felt discomfort. And so what I want to ground us in is in the power of beauty and life. And so I have just a couple questions for you to consider, so that you can hold on to that. So it's like, what causes awe and wonder in you? What's something in your life that wasn't supposed to happen, but against all odds, it did? And what has brought unexpected joy? And the reason that I asked to reflect on that before I start is because when we have these experiences, our imagination expands. What we think can't happen suddenly becomes possible. And so I want us to kind of go into that place, and to wrestle with that, with what we see in reality and with what we know can be possible. So I'll just give us a few seconds to find something to kind of go into that direction, and then I'll move on. May God bless us with restless discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships, so that we may live from deep within our hearts. May God bless us with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people, so that we may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless us with tears to shed for those who suffer pain, rejection, hunger, and war, so that we may reach out our hands to comfort them and turn their pain to joy. And may God bless us with enough foolishness to believe that we really can make a difference in this world, so that we are able, with God's grace, to do what others claim cannot be done. And so this is often attributed to a Franciscan blessing. So a little bit about me. I like to start off with this quote. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And this is a theme that I have throughout my presentation, because I think in our society, a very Western society, there's this sense of individuality, and that, something may be affecting them, but it's not affecting me. And so it's easy to turn away or to not act or feel any responsibility. And in reality, we actually we are connected, even if society tells us that we're not. So as it was mentioned, this is me when I was, I think, 3 years old. This is back in Mexico. And I was born in Iguala Guerrero, Mexico. I crossed the border when I was 5. And I did know that I crossed the border, but I didn't really know what that meant until I was in high school, kind of ready to leave high school, when I just did not have access to the same things that my peers did. And right as I was graduating, I found out about this conference called the Latino Youth Leadership Conference. And that conference has been a huge part of my life because it provided community, and it gave me something to do to kind of like work towards, instead of not really doing anything. And I did not know if I could go to college. I did not know if all these dreams that I had of, like, when you're younger, everybody asks you like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And um, I just didn't know if I could do any of that with my life. Um, and it was a very difficult time. I went and asked questions about to different places, UNLV. I think one of them was even Irvine. Um, and there was not a lot of hopeful answers. They said, yeah, you can come, but there's no financial aid, which is a different way of saying, well, you can't go, but it's taking away the responsibility from the institution. Um, and then in 2012, DACA came out. And it was something that, we were not expecting. We also didn't know what it was. There was a lot of questions and fear around it. But eventually I applied because it felt like it would help me to do the things that I wanted to do. And I started working at a nonprofit organization as a DACA caseworker, then as a U-Visa and VAWA caseworker. And I finished my bachelor's in psychology. And then I kind of had the question of like, well, what am I going to do next? I felt like I wanted to pursue psychology, but I mean, no one in my family or around me had ever gone to graduate school, much less actually in pursuit of psychology. So throughout the whole thing, I had to figure it out. I had to figure out how to do it, and what to do. And so I started applying. I applied to Fuller. And when I applied to Fuller, I let them know about my status. They didn't know about my status. They had no idea. But they said, like, you can come, like Fuller doesn't look into your status, you can come. But again, financial aid is not available to you, and those kinds of things. So it's weird. It's a weird sort of like, hey, the door's open, but there's really no way to support you. And yeah, I mean, I just graduated from Fuller, so I was able to kind of make it through. But it wasn't easy, and it's not a feel-good story, my time at Fuller. Despite all the help I received a lot of support. And what is difficult is how it still feels short. And so that's that part. However, with DACA, there's the ability to apply for what is known as advanced parole, and it gives you permission to leave the country and come back. And you can do that through educational purposes, for humanitarian purposes, or for work purposes. And so back in 2015, through the Mexican government and the US-Mexico Foundation, myself and 21 other DACA recipients were able to go to Mexico. And it was for educational purposes. It was so that we could learn more about Mexico, and we attended different conferences and all those kinds of things. But the thing that really made an impact in my life was that I got to meet my grandmother after like 20 years of not seeing her. And um, I was with her for maybe 10 hours. That's us saying goodbye. And meeting her after 20 years, it was both, a very beautiful experience, but it was also painful. Um, I don't know exactly why my parents decided to come here. Um, and I don't remember. I was 5. But there was something about meeting my grandmother that it sort of made sense. She stayed here at a hotel. That was my uncle that was with her. And when I took them up to their hotel room, my uncle asked me, like, can you teach me how to use the elevator? Um, and of course, I was just like, yes, of course. But that told me something. And I asked, my grandmother, like, how are you? What's your life like? And she told me about her life. Um, and she told me just very matter of fact how her body hurt, how she couldn't do these things that, just these new things, pain, and how um, the roof that they had, which is made from something just a little bit stronger than cardboard. I don't know the name in English for the material. Um, it had holes now, and so when it rained, they had to cover themselves with like tarp. And so I don't know everything, and I don't claim to know everything, but those pieces, they sort of connected as to why my parents took the decision that they made. Because growing up, I didn't understand it. And there's even a piece where, I blamed them because why would you bring me here? Um, and so that happened. And I wanted to stay in Mexico. This was the summer right before I came to Fuller. And I didn't know if I was even going to come to Fuller. Um, and so I wanted to stay in Mexico because it was the first time that I felt like I belonged, like it was the closest thing I had ever felt to home. Um, but because of other things, because at that time, Mexico had no process to validate your studies in the US and all of that. If I had stayed in Mexico right then and there, I would have become like an immigrant in my own country again. And so I decided to come back and to see if I could come to Fuller and to see what to do. And it changed the meaning for Fuller. For me, Fuller isn't or wasn't about making a big name for myself or changing the world or um, it wasn't about making a big name for myself or like I'm gonna become this like really great psychologist because becoming all of that would bring stability and safety into my life. um, Meeting my grandma, I knew that the moment that we had already stepped into the US, that my life was already fine. Like, I don't need the additional extra things. But what coming to Fuller meant then was that I had to be a different kind of person. I had to be the kind of person that stayed connected to my community, that stayed connected to myself, to not be pulled into um, whiteness in a way where I would lose myself. Because going through grad school, everything about it, it's very in ideologies and in what you're taught, it is very white. So, um, so yeah. And this is right before coming to Fuller. I try to fundraise, do all these things. And so that's one of my best friends. And those are photographs that I've taken throughout the years. And it's a fundraiser to go to grad school. This was taken, I think, the day right before the announcement for the lawsuit was made. And that's my advisor, who it's Dr. Liseth Rojas Flores, who she was the first person I met at Fuller who knew about DACA. And she has been instrumental in my whole time there. This is a conference that I talked about, and it's also, I'm here actually for this conference this week. I give a presentation on mental health, and I do a role play on what therapy looks like. And this was outside of the Ninth Circuit Court in Pasadena, where for the lawsuit, when it was heard, I think back in 2018, if I remember correctly. And this was back in November 2019. I spoke in front of the Senate. And, this work isn't done alone. And the way that the lawsuit worked, so there was several lawsuits in the US that came about because for the lawful rescinding of DACA. And so these are people that in one way or another, they are DACA recipients, and they are part of it as well. And, and here, this is us coming out of the Supreme Court. Everybody there is also a DACA recipient. And, we are people who, some of the people who have the least amount of rights in the US. And still, we stood up and we said that we matter and that we needed to be heard. And in this administration, we stopped this administration. We all know the many horrors that came out of the Trump administration, but this was one thing that they could not move forward with, and it was because of us. And it's not over, just because Trump isn't there anymore. But I think it speaks to who we are as people. And part of my journey has also been, like I said, so much support. In this picture, again, there's my advisor. There's the family that I lived with for 4 years, and there's additional friends that came along the way, and my best friends. And they're different, right? They're not all the same. And what I have learned in all of this, or a part of what I have learned, is that we're all connected. The joy, the pain, in coming to Fuller, so many of my relationships, because of circumstances, because I'm the only one at my program who went through the PhD in psychology. Everyone that I met was absolutely different from me. And most of them were white evangelical people. And so my relationships were just the anti of what our society says that needs to happen. And there is a certain level of joy when the things that are not supposed to happen. And there's also pain because it's messy, because we are different, because despite the desire to be good people, racism and xenophobia and all the things don't go away, because they're systemic and they're learned. I learned them, we all learned them. And we need to be able to acknowledge that, and that we have different responsibilities to then create the change that we want to create. And so, again, we're all connected. Sorry. Right. So then the way that I can sort of conceptualize this together is that we are called to bring life and beauty. And beauty isn't the like, oh, that's really pretty, all like, like easy thing. When I look at the life of Christ, his life speaks so much to us because it was also antithetical to everything around him. And it was hard. But that's the thing that gives us joy. That's the thing that gives us awe and like this sense of like, okay, we can keep going. So then life and beauty then are about going against the system and beliefs that tell us that there isn't enough. They are dangerous. You can buy safety, power, and security because we can't, we don't know what's going to happen. But society tells us that we can. And it's you or them. It means that if we believe in an all-powerful, all-knowing, and everlasting God, then there is surely more than enough. The unknown is taken care of, and we can connect with each other, enjoying the present moment. It means that when we know this, we can make decisions to build a different system instead of beliefs that no longer sacrifice the well-being of others for our own. It means that we are called to bring life and beauty. And that is my presentation.
Dr. Norma, so good to see you.
Thank you.
So good to see you. Oh, wow. Thank you so much for taking out the time today to really share so transparently your life and the message that you embody and that you have embodied while at Fuller. I'm so grateful and thank you for everything. And for the sake of time for the breakout, I wanted to connect the question with what our opening thought by Matt. It was very interesting because those two just connected as you shared with us your embodied experience, especially when you went back to Mexico and you met your grandmother after 20 years. You shared how that grounded you and the feelings that came over you, and then the subsequent mission or the vocational trajectory that resulted from there, but also that intersects with the unexpected joy, the awe that we never thought that we will ever embrace through life's tremendous challenges. And so I think today that you have made a pathway for us to, with grace and courage, to walk through with you, and to feel, as Matt was saying, to feel as we walk through. So as we break up into the small groups for our discussion, specifically, what is one feeling that has risen inside of you as Dr. Norma shared with us her life that you never thought or even recognized because of where we currently are, and each one of us finds ourselves in a different space and place in life in this United States, what we call United States of America. But I would like for us to, in the next few moments, think through what were some of the feelings that arose that you know you will have to embrace to walk through.
This train is bound for glory. This train is bound for glory. This train is bound for glory. If you ride, you must be holy. Oh, oh, oh. This train is bound for glory. This train is bound for glory. This train is bound for glory. If you ride, you must be holy. Oh, this train is a clean train. This train is a clean train. This train is a clean train. Everybody ride in Jesus' name. Oh, oh, this train is bound for glory. This train is bound for glory. This train is bound for glory. If you ride, you must be holy. Oh, 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 this train done left the station. This train done left the station. This train done left the station. This train is a clean train. This train is a clean train. Everybody ride in Jesus' name. Oh, this train is bound for glory. This train is bound for glory. This train, if you ride, you must be holy. Oh, this train is a clean train. This train is a clean train. Everybody ride in Jesus' name. This train is a clean train. This train bound for glory. This train is bound for glory. This train. This train done left the station. This train done left the station. This train done left the station. This train takes on every nation. Oh, 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 this train. Mhm.
Well, as we are back to the our General Assembly, wanted to invite, and especially we wanted to encourage those who typically do not share as much, or if you're new here and you have something to contribute, yeah, please do so. Or you have any questions for Dr. Norma, this is the opportunity to do so. Or if you like to share with what you shared in your small group, please do.
Well, I have to say that I was really moved, particularly when you showed the picture of all of you standing in front of the Supreme Court, and it made me think of that saying that the power of the people is greater than the people in power. I was just, I mean, I was really moved by that image, and I just wanted to run by you. A saying that I'm sure it's been around a lot longer than I've been familiar with it, but the saying we didn't. I just want your input on this. We didn't cross the border, but the border crossed.
us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's because of the U.S. stealing Mexico's land. That's where that comes from.
Yeah.
I think it was really powerful because everyone has this narrative of its such a blessing to come to the US, and I think it's really powerful to hear that it might not always be a blessing, it might be our choices made out of necessity, or it may be a choices like people kind of have hesitation on. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's true that most people don't start out in life dreaming of leaving their homeland.
Yeah. Yeah, that's never really the case. I don't think so. And it's interesting because when I was younger, I always felt like we had done something wrong. I felt like it was our fault and that we deserved all the things, all the difficulties that were happening. And now I've learned that it's a lie. It shouldn't have been that way. There shouldn't have been any reason as to why we should be going through this. And that the reasons for that, I think, are a bigger conversation, but maybe you are all more familiar with it in terms of US interventionism and capitalism and how that causes destabilization of governments in our home countries and why then there needs to be a reason to move. And I think that's one of the things, is that not all laws are just, and we get fed this idea that if it's the law, then it must be right and we must follow it. But sometimes it means that we have to challenge them and really think about what a law or policy is serving. It doesn't just happen to people that are undocumented. And that is something, at least personal, it has also meant that freedom from shame and guilt, and that I no longer hold that for myself or for anyone else.
Can you say something about, yourself as a psychologist, but just in general, would you say that there's a broad need for mental health support, specifically for people who feel like they've done something wrong when they have not?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that should be touched upon. And in the circles that I move in, it's mostly with undocumented immigrants or people that have an immigration history. It's a fight within themselves, right? Like, this is what happened, and um, sometimes it's still there for some people, where there is that shame and that guilt. And so there's a need to prove yourself, that you are worthy, that you do belong, that you are good. And yeah, I definitely think that's something that needs to be addressed. And sometimes that shame and guilt actually propels us to then become the enforcers of these oppressive policies within our own communities.
So, what about what about the need for mental health care for those who, rather than thinking they've done something right, they imagine they've done? I'm sorry, who haven't, who instead of thinking they've done something wrong, they imagine they've done something right.
So, I mean, it depends, right? Like, when someone comes for mental health, they come for whatever the reason is. My job as their therapist wouldn't be to tell them what they need to work on. If someone thinks that they've done something right, they probably wouldn't come to therapy for that. But I think that in the broader sense of like community, it's about being reflective and thinking about, why are we making the choices that we are making, and why do we have the beliefs that we have? Like, they don't just come from nowhere.
Wouldn't it be damaging to any of us if we thought that our advantage in life was because we did something right? And how would that affect our whole worldview?
Yeah, and I mean, and it's there. It is absolutely there, playing a part now. It's part of the narrative of this nation, that if you do things well and right and correct, then you will be rewarded. And it's not true.
Looks like David was going to say something.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very moving. I'm particularly impressed and full of joy that you are part of our society and functioning as a doctor and a psychologist. It just highlights that everybody has unique worth and something to offer, and in many cases such as yours, it's a lot. And how foolish we are as a society to put that in jeopardy or not to take full advantage of it. So I find your story very inspiring from that point of view. I have a question, you can answer it in general terms or in personal terms. I'm not trying to pry, but I'm just wondering what the status of DACA recipients is. So are they, to what extent are DACA recipients at risk despite what your achievement at the Supreme Court? Could if there, God forbid, there were a Trump too, could he then rescind DACA, and what would the status be? Do DACA recipients have a path to citizenship so that they can't be sent back to their home countries?
Right. So DACA is an executive order, which was done by President Obama. And it does not provide a pathway to citizenship. It provides a work permit for 2 years, and it provides for protection, from deportation for 2 years. During the Trump administration, that wasn't necessarily always the case. And now, we're hoping that at least it stays, but also because it doesn't provide the pathway to citizenship, that there's something done, actual legislation that provides a pathway to citizenship, and not just for DACA individuals, but for all the 11 million who are undocumented. And if there was another president and there's still no legislation, then they potentially could take it away.
So the DACA recipients, you are still vulnerable then?
Yes.
That's what I was going to ask. So with that vulnerability, let me ask Norma, you personally, do you look forward to a possibility to becoming a citizen, and how important is that to you?
I mean, that's a big question. I like the possibility of citizenship because I don't want to be in this limbo and always my life, really, I have to live it 2 years at a time at most. Right now, I actually have to renew, and there's delays. And so if my work permit is delayed, then that has consequences because everything to my life is tied to that work permit. So work, driver's license, all of those things. So in that sense, yeah, I would want to not have to continue going through that for, the rest of my life. In terms of citizenship in the broader sense, is that going to fix everything? No. There's obviously, like I mentioned, part of what I do, the mental health impacts of that, just because from one day to the next, there's a paper that says, that I'm a citizen, that doesn't take away the 20 plus years, whatever at the time, right? Yeah. That I have been undocumented.
So, Robina, why don't you go ahead and ask or make your statement and see what Norma's response is. Are you there, Robina? Well, I'll go ahead and read it. She says, thank you, Dr. Ramirez. It is time to live beyond nations and undo the coupling of belonging and borders.
I agree. I think one of the things is that if we look into our laws and specifically immigration laws, and we think of our values and beliefs, and if we start from there, you know, and we say we have beliefs that align with Christ, just to make it short, I do think that we would end up with open borders, you know. But it's the fear and the wanting to, or falling into these narratives that then make us feel, that then elicit our commitment to these borders.
Well, we're, you know, our time is up, but I think that's a great place, a placeholder for our thinking, and a great takeaway for all of us, that you know, that vision that you have, and that is shared by Robina. We're going to do communion together, and if you have something on hand that's anything close to bread and wine, you know, it could be toast and coffee, but whatever you have. As we humble our hearts before you, I think of all of those Latin American liberation theologians who see their people, their dispossessed people, as the crucified Christ. That as long as their people are in the position that they're in, there's a need for relief and resurrection. And so we come before you identifying with you, and to identify with you is to identify with all dispossessed peoples everywhere, impoverished, conquered peoples everywhere. We identify with them when we identify with you. So this is the body and the blood of our Redeemer, Jesus. Amen. Take and eat and drink.